This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
There's some cool stuff in the Darkfriend Social.
Sure is. Do you want to hit up the prophecy first?
Yeah, I was just about to say, I kind of want to read that. Guess I should say that we've completed the Eye of the World. We'll probably be releasing something in between the two books. I'm not exactly sure what.
Yeah, we sat down and had a rambling conversation with Kelsey about all sorts of things, and we'll see what comes out of that. But
yeah, we just reflected on starting the podcast and finishing the first book, but a lot of it just turned into us talking about our lives, which may or may not be interesting. Probably not.
We did a lot of Wheel of Time
yeah, there's stuff in there.
Too. Yeah, we definitely went off on a few Wheel of Time tangents.
So this might be back-to-back with the last chapter of the Eye of the World, and it might not. I'm not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah, we'll let you know.
Yeah. Well, you'll know.
You'll know already.
We just don't yet.
We don't yet. We're recording this in the past. Unless you're on the live. In that case, you're here present.
Speaking to people in the future.
So I'm super excited to be starting on The Great Hunt.
Yeah, we're
Book
about
2.
to break into the Darkfriend Social, which is a big event for the whole series.
Totally. You've got a new book that's not falling apart.
Yeah, fresh copy of The Great Hunt.
So something else to destroy.
Which should be like dust and ashes by the time I'm done, like the Eye of the World is.
But yeah, I really think that The Great Hunt is where the series breaks into its own. It's where it takes, The Eye of the World is a lot of nostalgia for me.
Yeah.
But The Great Hunt, to me, is really where the series starts to be something a little more than another interesting fantasy series.
Yeah, it kind of launches, and rather than having all these, like most of the chapters from Rand's perspective, except for a few in Eye of the World, this is where it really starts to break up into a lot of different plot lines.
And I think that starts by getting a view. This book starts with a view from the Darkfriends.
Yeah.
We see the bad guys' point of view. And it just gives us a little bit more insight into... And I really like that the way Jordan does that in this whole series, where he sort of humanizes the bad guys by giving you some insight into what they're thinking.
Yeah, and it gives you all the perspective that the Wheel of Time is known for, I think. But first... we have this fun prophecy at the very beginning of The Great Hunt. And it shall come to pass that what men made shall be shattered, and the shadow shall lie across the pattern of the age, and the Dark One shall once more lay his hand upon the world of man. Women shall weep, and men quail, as the nations of the earth are rent like rotting cloth. Neither shall anything stand nor abide. Yet one shall be born to face the shadow, born once more, as he was born before, and shall be born again, time without end. The dragon shall be reborn, and there shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth at his rebirth. In sackcloth and ashes shall he clothe the people, and he shall break the world again by his coming, tearing apart all ties that bind. Like the unfettered dawn shall he blind us and burn us, yet shall the dragon reborn confront the shadow at the last battle, and his blood shall give us the light. Let tears flow, O ye people of the world, weep for your salvation. The Prophecies of the Dragon from the, forgive my pronunciation, the Carathon cycle. Carathon?
Carathon.
Was that correct? Carathon cycle?
The Carathon is how the audiobooks say it. So I think that this whole prophecy is basically a description, it's a summary of everything from the breaking to the last battle. So I think the first sentence, and it shall come to pass that what men made shall be shattered, is describing the breaking.
That sounds right.
And then the next couple of sentences, the shadow shall lie across the pattern of the age, the Dark One shall lay his hand upon the world of man. I think that's Ishmael being in the world in the 3,000 years after the breaking.
Yeah.
I think the hand of the Dark One is Ishmael.
The weather manipulation.
Mm-hmm. Women shall weep and men quail as the nations of the earth are rent like rotting cloth. I think you're talking about the Trolloc Wars.
Okay.
Neither shall anything stand or abide. We just have those nations form up and then fall. We have 3 different calendars in those 3,000 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we have modern day H, the Aiel War. One shall be born to face the shadow. This is the dragon reborn. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth at his rebirth. You know, the middle of the Aiel War.
Yeah.
He's born in the middle of the war. That's what they're talking about there. And then the rest is sort of a prophecy for what Rand is going to do. He's going to break the world again. He's going to destroy the nations. He's going to bind them together.
Destroy the world to save the world.
Exactly. And then weep for your salvation. You know, everyone thinks that's them being sad for themselves, but that's really about being sad for Rand, because Rand is their salvation, and he has a sacrifice to make.
Oh, I like that.
You know, not weep for your salvation, but your salvation is Rand. Weep for Rand.
I'll take a sip of beer because I pretty much want to read the whole page. The whole first page.
This is the prologue. There's a map here. Do you have a map in yours?
Yeah. Just the world map.
The world map, yeah. It's got a little more detail than it did in the Eye of the World.
Oh, I didn't even notice.
It's still not quite as much as it gets overall. So we've got the countries. It's very a Tolkien-esque map at this point. Still very black and white.
Yeah.
The rivers are emphasized. I do really like the heron-marked sword through the horn up in the top. Above the symbol of the Aes Sedai with the trefoil leaves behind it.
Mm-hmm.
I always really like that symbol on the map.
Oh, I like the spear a lot.
The vertical spear with the...
Want to get all those tattoos one day, but...
Yeah, those are good ones.
I don't think I want to cover my entire body. Oh, who am I kidding? It's probably going to happen eventually. Who cares?
At the rate you're going, yeah, you're going to run out of space.
I only get it for like 80 more years at the very best, and I smoked a good deal of that, so probably not even 80 more years. Why not? Have fun.
80 years seems very optimistic.
Yeah. Yeah. It's probably not going to happen.
No.
You never know.
I mean, 80 total years, sure. 80 more years? Dude, we're not that young anymore. We'd be like the oldest people in the world if we lived 80 more years.
Maybe not 80 years from now.
That's a good point. You
never know.
Life expectancy is usually going up. Although I think it's been going down for the first time in history recently in the U.S. Because we're all really fat.
Thanks a lot, American healthcare. Yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
Keep politics out of this. And the prologue is titled In the Shadow, and our symbol is the snake in the wheel, which... Is this on purpose? What does it show you in the digital copy? Just that it's...
Same thing.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It's like pure black in my book, I figured.
Oh, no, I think that's just a... Yeah,
misprint.
That's just a print, yeah. It's the standard. It's just a... There's not a lot... The white lines in it are pretty thin, so...
Yeah.
If it bleeds at all, it's just going to look all black.
The man who called himself Bors, at least in this place, sneered at the low murmuring that rolled around the vaulted chamber like soft gabble of geese. His grimace was hidden by the black silk mask that covered his face, though, just like masks that covered the 100 other faces in the chamber, 100 black masks, and 100 pairs of eyes trying to see what lay behind them. If one did not look too closely, the huge room could have been in a palace, with its tall marble fireplaces and its golden lamps hanging from the domed ceiling, its colorful tapestries and intricately patterned mosaic floor. If one did not look too closely, the fireplaces were cold, for one thing. Flames danced on logs as thick as a man's leg, but gave no heat. The walls behind the tapestries, the ceiling above the lamps, were undressed stone, almost black. There were no windows, and only 2 doorways, one at either end of the room. It was as if someone had intended to give the semblance of a palace reception chamber, but had not cared enough to bother with more than the outline of a few touches for detail.
All right. Couple of things. One, that is a perfect description of Ishmael's dream shard.
Yeah, except bigger than normal.
Right. But it's like, I think that's absolutely saying, okay, first the fireplaces are cold, for one thing. And that we only ever see that in the Teleron Riyadh dream shard.
Right.
Second, the idea that it's a semblance of palace, but he didn't bother to put like the detail into it, is totally an indication that it's just a thought up, imagined place that he just like put the bare minimum of thought into. So I think this is definitely just an artificial place created in the dream shard for these folks to get together.
Yeah, which I always say is modeled after like if there were a throne room at Shale Ghul.
Right.
This is what it would look like. The black rock of Shale Ghul. It's like carved out of it.
Yes, but I do think that it's not actually at Shale Ghul. Even though he says that later, I think he's lying.
Yeah.
I think this is...
There's no way to really know. It could be anywhere or nowhere.
I guess the only thing is the cold fireplaces. Do we ever see that in the real world?
No.
That's the only reason I think that this is definitely in the Dream Shard. Plus, the more I see Moradin, the more I think that's where he hangs out or Ishmael. I think that's where he hangs out all the time. Right.
And I did notice while I was reading through this that there's no other than Boars or who's Carridin, by the way. Jaichim Carridin, is that how we pronounce
Yes, Jaichim
that?
Carridin. A white cloak and a questioner.
Right. Other than him saying or thinking, but for such a summons, even he came. It's never mentioned how anyone gets there or how they get back to where they came from. So are they summoned in their dreams while they're sleeping?
Yeah, I definitely wrote that down. Where I was not sure if they were summoned with their dreams. I think that they are stepping through a gateway.
Into the Dream Shard.
Into the Dream Shard.
Okay.
So basically entering the dream in the flesh. And basically what Ishmael does is summon them, open up a gateway. We've seen them like make a noise, like ring a bell or something before they open the gateway.
Yeah, that's something the Forsaken use.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if maybe he's...
bust into your friend's place while they're,
Right.
Yeah.
It's like ringing the doorbell.
Uh-huh.
So I'm wondering if maybe they can use a different noise, like, you are summoned, and then gateway opens.
Or the scream of the innocent or something.
Totally. And they walk through it, and they're in Ishmael's Dream Shard, where he has control and has created this sort of sketchy palace-like place that's not really a palace, but it's kind of a meeting room for them all.
In this unreal Shale Ghul-esque landscape.
Yep. That he just seems to live in all the time.
Yeah.
And then here, he actually reiterates here that the fires were cold. Like, he talks about that, he mentions it in that paragraph, and then a paragraph later, he's talking about, these fires are cold, these fires are cold. That's just, whenever Jordan repeats something like that, it makes me say, like, why is he saying that over and over again? Well, he's making a point.
Yeah, I think he wants us to notice, and I think in a clever, cunning, observant man like Carridin would note that over and over because it freaks him out, first of all, that he can't explain it. He doesn't know where he is. And because a lot of this chapter, the majority of this chapter is Carridin observing observing and kind of taking mental notes about the people around him and what he can learn from this, from this event.
So the next thing I have is the description of these servants.
Talking about servants circulated through the guests, slender, golden-haired youths, proffering wine with a bow and a wordless smile. Yeah, it took, I think, both of us a second, but Seth and I realized at about the same time while we were sitting here reading this together that these servants are the Shadowspawn that are called Zomara. We see them quite a few times throughout the series. They're, I think, soulless human beings.
And apparently one of Ishmael's favorite servants.
Right.
And just, I had to look them up because I always thought they were just compelled young people who all looked the same. Sort of like the way Grendel creates her collection of people with compulsion.
Right.
But actually looking them up, I found out these are Shadowspawn created supposedly by Aganor just to be the perfect servants.
Yeah.
Out of raw human stock. But they have a couple of abilities. They can read your mind.
Yeah, the purpose of being that you wouldn't have to ask the servant for what you wanted. It would already know.
Exactly. They are just like the perfect servants. They can't tell any information they overhear, but at the same time, they're they can read your mind and know exactly what you want.
And they're described as not very intelligent, but graceful, perceptive, telepathic, but they can only follow basic orders. And beautiful.
Yeah.
I saw also that one of the Forsaken, I think I saw this in one of the Wheel of Time wiki type places, one of the Forsaken thinks that Ishmael must have found a stasis box full of these things.
I think that was Grendel.
Because they're super rare now and hard to find, which may or may not be why she goes about creating her own.
Right. Well, and Ishmael's, he's been out long enough, he's been able to locate a few stores of things.
Yeah. I mean, dude might even have stockpiles of stuff laying around. He's been, popping in and out for the last few millennia. He knows where stuff is. It's the same world.
And he's got the Black Oddjaw working for him.
Yeah.
And they know where stuff is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's one of the... at one point, one of the characters says the Forsaken have had trouble finding Angreal. I always wondered why they didn't just go to the White Tower and take some of theirs.
I don't know. Maybe they don't know where it is, other than Ishmael?
Yeah, it's always a question I had.
Yeah.
Is what prevents the Forsaken from just, throwing on a mask of mirrors, inverting the weaves, walking into the White Tower, and snagging up their store of Angreal?
Can you open a gateway into the tower?
Yeah.
I know there's wards and stuff down there where they store things, but I'm pretty sure you could just travel in and out.
Right. I mean, that's what Egwene does when she gets the Sora's Angreal.
She just opens a gateway right into the storeroom.
Totally.
I guess they just don't know where they are, and we do know that they're way less plentiful than they once were.
True. So, and then we get a series of him just observing the various other characters around him, which to me, for the most part, just establishes a couple of things. It gives you a baseline for some of these nations that we haven't heard of before. It sort of gives you a description of what those characters are like, and it also sort of gives you the point that there are dark friends everywhere, in every nation, in every slice of life, there's a dark friend.
Right, so Carridin notices that there's rich, poor, he sees woman from Ilion, first blood of Zaman.
Yeah, the Domini.
Yeah, and he goes on, even a tinker in bright green breeches and a virulent yellow coat.
He really hates the Tinkers.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got
That's like a thing about him. Whenever Tinkers come up and Carridin's around, he really hates them for no good reason.
Oh, and I think that there's a Shinar in there, and I think that's Ingtar.
Yeah, I think that's definitely Ingtar, and I think the two Aes Sedai that he sees is Liandrin, and we were talking about this earlier, the other one's Alviarin.
Alviarin, yeah. Those are the two we think would be most active at this point and would be getting instructions.
Yeah.
Because Alviarin is probably conspiring at this point to try and get... she probably gets instructions to try and take down the Armelin seat, and she starts trying to plot to do that.
Right.
And Liandrin may or may not, at this point, probably doesn't yet have instructions to kidnap the girls, but she'd be active.
Yeah. We sadly don't get to see what anyone's orders are, but
No.
I think that's part of the mystery of this chapter. I think those were the only three that I could identify.
Yeah. Yeah, everyone else...
Could be anyone, really.
Yeah, like a dark friend... High Lord of Tyr could be didn't we think that?
Oh, we thought that was probably Weiramon.
Yeah, Weiramon or whatever. Yeah, that was my only guess with him.
Yeah, because as far as High Lords of Tyr that are also dark friends, it's the only one we could think of. We even see a sea folk man.
Right. I think we were thinking maybe the Andoran guard could be somebody, but I don't think we were able to. It could be any of the guards, really.
Oh, yeah, we were talking about it, but I couldn't,
Yeah. I mean, later we see Elaine pick up a dark friend as the guard. Marilor? What's his name?
Marilor. Wait. No,
Marilor is the
Fields of Marilor.
Yeah, the fields.
Yeah, I came up with it last time we were talking about this. Talonvor.
No, not Talonvor. Talonvor's a good dude. He ends up marrying the queen.
Damn it, what's the name?
Melar.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's
a guard either.
A guard at any point near.
So it could be anyone.
So it could be anyone. So we never, and like all of those guardsmen end up being in the service of. They all end up being in service of a Forsaken anyway because he takes over and/or.
Oh yeah.
So there's all of those dark friends in service there.
A chime sounded, a single shivering note that came from everywhere at once and cut off all the sounds like a knife. The tall doors at the far end of the chamber swung open, and 2 Trollocs stepped into the room. Spikes decorating the black mail hung to their knees. Everyone shied back, even the man who called himself Boris.
These are some great descriptions of the Trollocs and the Murdral. You know, if you really want a nice, visceral, physical description of what they look like and what they are like, I think this is a good paragraph for it.
Sure, I'll read it. Head and shoulders taller than the tallest man there, they were a stomach-turning blend of man and animal. Human faces, twisted and altered. One had a heavy, pointed beak where his mouth and nose should have been, and feathers covered his head instead of hair. The other walked on hooves, his face pushed out in a hairy muzzle, and goat horns stuck up above his ears. Ignoring the humans, the Trollocs turned back toward the door and bowed, servile and cringing. The feathers on one lifted into a tight crest. I liked that.
Yeah, I like that too. That sort of alarm of a bird that translates over into...
They puff up.
Exactly.
A Murdral stepped between them, and they fell to their knees. He was garbed in black that made the Trollocs' male and humans' masks seem bright, garments that hung still, without a ripple, as it moved with a viper's grace. The man who called himself Bors felt his lip drawing back over his teeth, half snarl and half, he was shamed to admit even to himself, fear. It had its face uncovered, its pasty, pale face, a man's face, but eyeless as an egg, like a maggot in a grave. That is nice prose from Jordan there. And dark. I like all the darkness in the series.
Thinking about what a Murdral is, and I sort of came up with this theory that a Trolloc is basically a man with the soul removed and replaced with the soul of an animal. And that a Murdral is this throwback where the soul of the animal doesn't get inserted, and so you're left with this totally soulless creature that sort of exists outside the pattern and is just like the body of a man, the viciousness of a man without any of the soul to temper it.
Right. That's like a imprinted with shadow thing that had never should have existed. Don't the wolves call them the Neverborn?
Yeah, totally. I wonder if that's why it's easier for the Dark One to inhabit Shadar Haran. That he sort of takes the place of the soul.
That they have like some, yeah.
And because they sort of exist outside the pattern, he's able to like...
Bit of the Dark One instead of a soul.
Exactly.
Or a bit of true power instead of soul, or whatever that is. Yeah, I like that. Your master comes, the Mirdral's voice rasped like a dry snakeskin crumbling. To your bellies, worms. Grovel, lest his brilliance blind and burn you. Rage filled the man who called himself Bors, at the tone as much as the words, but then the air above the half-man shimmered, and the import drove home. It can't be. It can't. And I'm not sure what Bors is thinking here, but I assume he knows enough that he believes he's looking at a Forsaken until Ishmael calls himself Bale Zaman.
Yeah, I think he's basically saying it can't be the Dark One. It can't. Like, he hasn't broken out yet.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he fears that it is the Dark One. And it's not until later that he realizes it's probably just a Forsaken. But even that's bad enough.
Yeah, and we have this interesting Dark Friend prayer here. I don't know if I should read the whole thing, but...
So I was hoping we could read just the Dark Friend parts, and then...
I have it kind of highlighted in that way.
Yeah, so let's read, like... Because he sort of is saying one and thinking the other.
Yeah.
So he's praying to the Dark Lord, but thinking...
Save me.
Save me, basically. And that's the, the white cloak part of him.
I think I have this all right. The great Lord of the Dark is my master, and most heartily do I serve him to the last shred of my very soul. Lo, my master is death's master. Asking nothing do I serve against the day of his coming, yet do I serve in the sure and certain hope of life everlasting. Surely the faithful shall be exalted in the land, exalted above the unbelievers, exalted above thrones. Yet do I serve humbly against the day of his return. Swift come the day of return. Swift come the great Lord of the Dark to guide us and rule the world forever and ever.
And he's thinking, the Dark One and all the Forsaken are bound in Sheol Ghul, bound by the Creator at the moment of creation. No, I serve a different master now. The hand of the Creator shelters us all, and the light protects us from the shadow.
No,
Yeah,
a different master.
A different master.
Yeah.
So he's all...
shaken.
Totally.
The Myrddraal instructs them to rise. And I'll read this too. The figure of a man floated in the air above the Myrddraal, the hem of his blood-red robe hanging a span over the half-man's head. Masked in blood-red too. Would the great Lord of the Dark appear to them as a man, and masked besides? Yet the Myrddraal, its very gaze fear, trembled and almost cowered where it stood in the figure's shadow. The man who called himself Bors grasped for an answer in his mind could contain without splitting. One of the Forsaken, perhaps. Oh, so he is thinking that.
So yeah, he's thinking, and we know this is Ishmael, and he's masked because he has been horribly burned by Rand.
And the very next thing I have is where Bors notices that Ishmael's hands are burned, which I thought was kind of interesting. I mean, I guess you can't... It's difficult to heal yourself with the power.
I imagine that these, because of the nature of the one power that Rand used, that these wounds aren't healing. They can't necessarily be healed easily.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Also, we don't really know how much time has passed in between, the last chapter of the Eye of the World and the prologue of The Great Hunt. But I assume it's probably like days.
Yeah, I imagine not much. Because we go right into Rand, a week later? A couple of weeks later in Faldara?
Wait, you mean after this? I love this scene.
Yeah, we're both reading now instead of looking. But he says, Land definitely says, I thought you'd be 2 weeks gone by now.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was looking for. 2 weeks.
Yeah, and possibly maybe he would have thought he would have hung out for a week and then left. So maybe 3 weeks.
Okay. Well, that's a significant amount of time to be going around with no skin on your body.
Yeah.
Which is sort of what I'm imagining Ishmael looks like underneath the mask. And
I imagine it's more cracked, deep fissures and missing chunks.
Yeah, those gesturing hands were horribly burned, crisscrossed by black fissures, the raw flesh between as red as the figure's robes. So he is part way healed.
I think he's I did notice this whole paragraph right before that is sort of him giving us a little summary of the history of... This is the first chapter. He's talking about the history of the One Power and the Backlash and the Men and the 100 Companions. And there's just sort of a little paragraph there that's a summary of the breaking and everything that happened afterwards.
Yeah.
Jaichim Carridin gives us a little bit of a recap right there. Just for those of you who don't remember the book one, that paragraph is a good place to sort of get the background and the history.
Well, I'm noticing here, this is kind of interesting. Ishmael says, I have been known by many names, but the one by which you shall know me is Bale Zaman. Which I'm interpreting more as a declaration you will call me Bale Zaman. He's not saying, I am Bale Zaman.
Right.
Which is misleading, but he's also not saying, I'm the Dark One.
Right.
He's saying, but you are going to call me that.
Ishmael never claims to be the Dark One. He only ever claims to be Bale Zaman. And everyone thinks Bale Zaman is the Dark One because the Trollocs call him that. But I think it's the Trolloc name for Ishmael.
Exactly. The more we work on this podcast, the more I think Bale Zaman just means the heart of the dark,
right.
Which could be literally anything. It doesn't have to be the Dark One. And it could definitely be Ishmael.
I think the heart of the dark, Ishmael is the heart of the Dark One.
Yeah.
And so I think absolutely Bale Zaman is a name for the leader of the Trollocs who led them through the Trolloc War. Well, who led them through the Trolloc War? Not the Dark One, Ishmael.
Right. So Ishmael's like a legend to them.
Yeah. And so all these people who think the Trolloc name for the Dark One is Bale Zaman are just wrong. It's the Trolloc name for Ishmael.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes in, where everyone's like, he's the Dark One. No, he's not. Well, and the fact that he's a little confused and a little insane himself. And he does maybe think he is the Dark One occasionally. And
I do think he lies on purpose quite a bit.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, because...
Sorry. Yeah. Father of lies.
For instance... we were talking about this a bit before we flipped on the recording. The next thing I have is like a couple of paragraphs from there. The place where you stand lies in the shadow of Sheol Ghul, Ishmael says to the Darkfriends, but when we were talking, we think like this is a dream shard.
I do think that. And I think he's lying here. I do think he's lying. No, I mean, it is entirely possible that he... gatewayed them all into this building in the shadow of Sheol Ghul. It's entirely possible. But I don't think it is.
No, I don't think so either. And wouldn't a dream shard be a much more secure place to meet even if, like a dream shard, Ishmael's dream shard that he created would be a much more secure place to meet than, say, simply making gateways to... a place that he created in the shadow of Sheol Ghul in Tel Riyadh. Like, why would you just bring all these people to Tel Riyadh who aren't dreamers? You would make a safe place to bring them to.
Right. He's just bringing them there in the physical world, not even in Tel Riyadh.
I definitely don't think it's that.
Okay. Why?
I feel like there would be more signs. Like... Carridin would be able to feel it. The people would be able to feel that they were near Sheol Ghul.
Okay, fair enough.
Reality would be weird.
I like that.
And not that there isn't some weird reality stuff happening, like the fire that creates no heat.
Right. But that's more Dream Shard stuff rather than
this also
Sheol Ghul stuff.
Looks just like the place that Ishmael and later Moradin is always hanging out in. This is like his spot. This is his... He made a dream shard that's his living room.
Right.
And he goes there all the time.
And he's a dreamer.
Yeah.
So he has just great and ultimate control over it.
Sometimes it's small. In this case, it's a really big room. But for a dreamer, that's no problem to make a small adjustment.
No. I also noticed here he thought he could feel the heat of an open furnace in that gaze. That's just the fires of Bale Zaman's mouth and eyes giving off heat. So Ishmael gives a little bit of a rant here. The wheel of time will be broken. The great serpent will die. The power of that death, the death of time itself.
Your master will make the world in his own image for the age and for all ages to come. Again, not saying I will.
He's just saying, I'm nodding. And that sort of is enough of a lie to make you think he's talking about himself.
Again, it's a misleading way to say it, but he's not actually lying.
Right.
Or, he's not fabricating anything.
So then he sort of pops out images of the three boys.
Yeah, I noticed he uses the true power to do that, which is interesting.
Is it the true power, or if he's in a dream shard, he's just making them appear?
Oh, that could very
using
well
his
be.
Mind.
But it does say the air to Bale Zaman's left shimmered and thickened when he produces the picture of Matt, or the... It's not really a picture.
Image.
It's a life-size
the
representation that, like a hologram. Boris debates in his own head for a little, like, is that a living person, or is that... And then he notices it's not breathing.
Right.
So for him, he couldn't even tell that it wasn't an actual human being. And then when he produces the image of Perrin, it says the air to Bale Zaman's right wavered as with heat. For the third time, the air solidified into the shape of a young man. It could be either. I just assumed it was the true power because of the shimmery...
Yeah, but that could also just be him using his special effects dream shard stuff.
Yeah, he wouldn't have to channel here.
No. But if he did, no one would be able to tell. He could probably even just use the one power and no one would notice, because I don't think there are any male channelers in the room. But he uses the true power for everything. Yeah, that's definitely something we see the girls do later in the dream, is create sort of a shimmering image of a hologram, if they want to look at it.
Gotcha.
So it does very much seem to be a dream shard effect.
So...
I noticed that Boris particularly notices the yellow eyes. I was wondering if he could have gotten information from the White Cloaks about Perrin and the yellow eyes.
Maybe. He's stationed in Tarabon right now, right? Or, wait, is that right?
I think so, yeah. So, yeah, that would be kind of hard for him to get word because it's not really a convenient location, but...
Not impossible.
Yeah. He definitely notices the yellow eyes, but I think that's just because it's an oddity, not because he knows about a boy with yellow eyes. Because I feel like he would have commented on it, in particular, if he'd heard about it from another White Cloak.
Yeah. I noticed that he also notes the battle axe. And he really thinks about it. Well, he thinks it's odd that the boy would be carrying an axe.
That's unusual. I mean, it's a farm boy with a
battle axe.
Very nice battle axe. One that a lord basically would pay a lot of money for.
Yeah. That's probably all that is.
Yeah.
And he particularly remarks on Rand having the heron mark blade. And
I think for a lot of the same reasons.
Yeah, that everyone else does.
Yeah.
What are you doing with that, boy?
Basically.
Yeah. Oh, and we were talking about this earlier, too. Bors notices the Murdral looking at the image of Rand, trembling, and unless he misjudged entirely, its trembling was no longer fear, but hatred. And I was wondering why the Murdral knows to hate this figure.
I thought...
You had a theory on that.
Yeah, I mean, it could be one of the Murdral that was chasing them in the Eye of the World. So there was multiple Murdral there. There was one in particular in Emmons Field. There was one in particular that got Tom, and then there was a bunch of them that chased them into Shadow Logoth.
Yeah, so at least...
I think it was like 6 or something.
Yeah,
8.
I'm going to say somewhere between 3 and half a dozen Murdral have actually seen the boys already, know what they look like, that they're important to the Dark One, or at least to Ishmael. So
it could be one of those, or it could just be a generic Murdral who knows that that's the Dragon Reborn and has hatred for the Dragon Reborn in principle.
Yeah. Dead silence had fallen. Silence that Bale Zaman had let deepen before he spoke. There is now one who walks the world, one who was and will be, but is not yet, the dragon. A startled murmur ran through his listeners.
I really like that sentence.
There's some interesting stuff going on here. Oh, this runs right into it. Ingtar yells out, "The Dragon Reborn! We are to kill him, great lord?" That from the Shinaran. "Perhaps," Bale Zaman said simply, "and perhaps not. Perhaps he can be turned to my use. Sooner or later it will be so, in this age or another." The man who called himself Bors blinked. In this age or another? I thought the day of return was near. What matter to me what happens in another age if I grow old and die waiting in this one? I just thought that thought was interesting. I guess I'm wondering what's going on in Ishmael's head. If he believes he's going to win, or maybe he doesn't know that he's going to win. He knows that this is just another shot at it.
Yeah, I mean, this is his fatalism coming into play. He knows that the Dark One will always get another chance, and so he thinks that there's no way that the side of the light can win. Eventually the dark will win. Yeah. And he doesn't really care. Obviously he wants it to be sooner rather than later, but the whole reason he threw in with the dark is he thought there was no way the light could win. Simply because... Perpetually, right. That any win by the light was just a delaying action.
Right, because the Dark One only has to win once.
Exactly. He only has to break the wheel once, whereas every time the wheel turns, he gets another shot at it. So that's Ishmael's philosophy, and that's sort of what he goes into here. Is he sort of loses himself and is ranting a little bit and gets a little too honest. He's like giving the whole propaganda speech and starts like letting out some of his personal philosophy here.
Yeah, he does do that.
One thing I noticed is how eager the Shinaran was just kill Rand.
Yeah.
If that's Ingtar, he was just like, oh, Dragon Reborn? I know who that is. I'll kill him. No problem.
He's eager for the glory.
Exactly. And that's his whole issue with the horn, is he's eager for the glory the whole time.
Yeah.
It's not until he passes through the portal stone that he is redeemed. Or even, like, understands the depth of the corruption his soul has fallen to.
Yeah, Ingtar is the only person in this room, other than Ishmael, who knows all the boys.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think of that until we just had this conversation right now. He's seen all three of them.
He escorted them to the Blight.
Mm-hmm.
And here we get the idea, the first time, the idea that it really is more important to turn Rand than it is to kill him.
Yeah. And that Ishmael really wants Rand alive.
Right. And he really does the whole time. Really, up until the very end, he's always attempting to turn him.
Yeah, who do the orders to kill Rand come from? Later, eventually.
Yeah, there's a brief time where he does, so it's after Rand kills Ishmael. There's a period of time where it's open season.
So when Ishmael's not around.
Yeah. And that's that leads into Lord of Chaos, and then Ishmael sort of comes back in Book 7, and he crosses streams with Rand, and thereafter is sort of physically bonded with him, and then he doesn't want him killed simply because he's not sure how that would affect him.
Yeah.
So there's a sort of a brief period of time where but at that point, Rand's surrounded by the Aiel and sort of lost in the waste. No one really knows where he is.
And good luck killing him while he's surrounded by maidens.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we see Ishmael go around the room and give each individual dark friend a vision.
And he seems to be using, pretty standard, he's muting sound, so makes a little bubble around each person so only he can hear them.
Yeah.
He seems probably using a bit of compulsion on them.
It seems so.
At least on Bors, because he gives Bors commands that Bors then forgets.
Right. And we see some of the images, but...
yeah, I definitely want to talk about those.
Yeah. I wanted to throw out there that when it's Bor's turn, Ishmael says to him in the vision, "Are you faithful, Bors?" The hint of mocking in the name sent a chill down his backbone. "I am faithful, great lord." And I noticed that Bors is a character in Arthurian legend.
Okay.
It's like a sideline, not very well-known knight. Yeah, I don't know if that's an indicator of that and that maybe Ishmael knows that story or not, or just mocking him for having a fake name at all.
I think it's him just basically indicating, like, I could say your real name, but I'll use your fake name if you want me to. I keep bringing up Ingtar again, but here was another... The Shinaran, his stance to speak in confusion even while he acquiesced. So he was basically given orders that confused him. And, before he thought he was supposed to kill Rand, and he was obviously given different orders not to kill Rand.
Yeah.
Possibly to get the horn or something like that. Maybe like he was given orders to get whatever was in the box or something. I could imagine him... Oh, he's told to open the dog gate at the keep. That's right. So that lets...
Oh. Yeah.
Good call. Good call. Who was that?
Aradia.
Arad. Yeah, good call on that one. So he thinks he should be like told to kill the Dragon Reborn, and instead he's told to unlock a gate. And he's like, okay.
And then we see Carridin's orders here.
Which is basically to go to Almouth Plain and create chaos.
Yeah.
he was out there killing. He wants him to keep doing it.
Return to Tarabon, continue your good works, redouble your efforts. Watch for the 3 young men, and tell your followers to watch. Regarding those who have landed at Toman Head and the Domani, of this you will speak to no one.
So right there, he's talking about the Shan-Chan.
Right.
So Bors knows about the Shan-Chan. So he's way out. He's on the coast. Almost Plain is like right next to Falma.
Yeah, and I think Ishmael is banking on the chaos that the Shan-Chan invasion will create. Yeah, Almoth Plain is basically just inland of Toman Head.
Right.
And then the crazy vision. Should I read this?
Yeah.
I'll stop when appropriate.
Sure.
Abruptly, he felt his head grasped as though by a giant hand crushing his temples, felt himself being lifted, and the world blew apart in 1,000 starbursts, each flash of light becoming an image that fled across his mind, or spun and dwindled into the distance before he could more than barely grasp it. An impossible sky of striated clouds, red, yellow, and black, racing as if driven by the mightiest wind the world had ever seen, which is Shale Ghul.
I think it's the portal world.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because I think that's where we see the striated clouds.
We do see that there as well.
Because what I think is this is basically foretelling a bit of what happens in this book. We're seeing...
Yeah, there's a few things.
Yeah. So a woman, a girl dressed in white, receded into blackness and vanished as soon as she appeared. Clearly Selene.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm thinking he's seeing into the portal world where Selene appears to Rand, a.k.a. Lanfear.
A raven stared him in the eye, knowing him, and was gone.
I think that's the Shan-Chan. Because they've landed on Toman Head.
An armored man in a brutal helm, shaped and painted and gilded like some monstrous poisonous insect, raised the sword and plunged to one side beyond his view. That's obvious.
Obviously Shan-Chan.
Shan-Chan. Yep. A horn, curled and golden, came hurtling out of the far distance. One piercing note it sounded as it flashed toward him, tugging his soul.
So that's the Horn of Velier coming from via Thane across the entire continent.
Yeah, I'm nodding. At the last instant, it flashed into a blinding golden ring of light that passed through him, chilling him beyond death. A wolf leaped from the shadows of lost sight and ripped out his throat. He could not scream. The torrent went on, drowning him, burying him.
The wolf is clearly Perrin, I think.
And the problems that Perrin's going to create for the White Cloaks, maybe.
Totally.
And then the world is destroyed.
Yeah. The moon and the stars fell, the rivers ran in blood, the dead walked, the earth split open, and that's just, I think, the last battle.
Yeah, it's strange. This almost looks like a dreamer's dream. Doesn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. It looks like Ishmael is imprinting a bit of himself onto Jaichim Carridin here. Because, here he uses this command that he says, some commands are too important to be known even by he who carries them out. So he's clearly using a bit of compulsion or a bit of something that he's imprinting on Jaichim Carridin to make him do something.
It's like pouring information into his head and then it's erased.
Exactly.
Or, he'll act when the time comes without knowing what he's doing.
So do you have any idea what that command was?
No.
Me neither. I can't think of anything Jaichim Carridin does that's all that significant.
I assume it's to just place an inflection on his actions, so at the right time he'll act in Bale Zaman's interest.
The only time I see something happen that brings me back to this time is when Jaichim Carridin sees Matt. He's at Millie Skane's place, and Matt follows Millie Skane from the Silver Circuit.
Uh-huh.
And she meets with Jaichim Carridin, and he's standing at the window, and he sees Matt, and his mind just like something happens to his head, and something crashes into his head, and immediately Ishmael shows up.
It's like an alarm system.
And freezes time, and talks to him, and gives him commands, and stuff like that.
This is preset. I feel like it's probably I don't you know I really don't think Ishmael is actually showing up. It's part of it's like a command prompt. He sees Matt and he remembers the orders.
Oh, I think it does, because he, like, Millie Skane freezes, and then he, like, walks around her and, like, appears on the other side of her. And she's like, how did you get on the other side of me? And it was because Ishmael, like, froze her.
Oh.
So I think it's just,
I
think it's a summoning. I think that it's sort of a trigger that as soon as he sees one of the three boys, Ishmael is summoned.
Interesting. Yeah, like an alarm system.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess at that point it's Moradin showing up. But yeah, if anyone has any ideas about what that could possibly be, what that command is, or how that affects him, I'd love to hear theories on that one.
Yeah, and that's pretty much all, other than one of the Shadowspawn servants, after Bors realizes that he's just forgotten all the things he saw. One of the Shadowspawn servants brings him to his room.
Mm-hmm. And I just note there's a couple of times here where the servants read his mind.
Yeah, and Boris is confused about that.
Yeah, and that's one of the ways we know they're Shadowspawn rather than just compelled humans.
Right. And I kind of want to read this if I can find it really quick. Blank eyes, empty eyes, a doll's eyes, even more dead than death. It's from the beginning of the chapter. And then I just have my typical last paragraph to read, unless you want to add anything.
Just here he says, none will see you depart here nor arrive at your destination. Mm-hmm. But it may be best to arrive properly clothed. So, like, don't show up in your black garb.
Yeah.
In the middle of the White Tower. But basically what I think he's going to do is there'll be a gateway opened.
Each dark friend is led off to a different place in the Dream Shard and then transported back to wherever they need to be.
Exactly. Which is different than, like, if they were just asleep and they just poofed and back into their dreams and woke up again, which we've seen a bunch.
Yeah.
So this doesn't seem to be a dream.
No.
This seems to be that they are there physically in the flesh.
Yeah, they're not sleeping.
Exactly.
They were summoned. Ishmael would have had to either send a servant or just true power gateway them right to where they showed up.
I assume he just true power gatewayed them.
The man who called himself Boris shivered in spite of himself. Hastily, he undid the seals and buckles of his saddlebags and pulled out his usual cloak. In the back of his mind, a small voice wondered if the promised power, even the immortality, was worth another meeting like this, but he laughed it down immediately. For that much power, I would praise the great Lord of the Dark under the Dome of Truth. Remembering the commands given him by Bale Zaman, he fingered the golden, flaring sun worked on the breast of the white cloak, and the red shepherd's crook behind the sun, symbol of his office in the world of men, and he almost laughed. There was work, great work, to be done in Tarabon and on Almoth Plain.
And so that's sort of the reveal at the end that he's a white cloak. So
yeah.
you haven't really known up to this point, but you get the fingers of the golden flaring sun, which is clearly the white cloak symbol, and the red shepherd's crook, which
for
says
the questioners.
And it's almost, and the Dome of Truth, I think, is also perhaps a white cloak building.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's like their headquarters, I think.
Because that's where
or is that the questioners' headquarters? I'll look it up really quick.
Is that where Pedron Nile sits, or is that where the questioners sit? But of course, it just goes to show how awful the White Cloaks are. They spend all the time rooting out Darkfriends, and they're being led by one. Because he's the head of the questioners, I believe.
Yeah. It's inside the Fortress of the Light.
Okay.
And it's where, like, the heads of the White Cloaks meet.
Okay. So it's probably Patron Nile's chambers, basically.
It's also where they put Darkfriends on trial, which I think is part of the irony.
Yeah, oh, yeah. All right. Well, that's the Great Hunt. We're in the Great Hunt.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm excited for the first paragraph of the next chapter.
Me too.
I always get tingly when we read that one.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?